So welcome to Ken Mogi's Fedpen Radio. In this episode, I would like to discuss large language models and why they are so effective. This morning, I signed up for ChatGPT Plus. I've been busy, and I was meaning to do this before, but could only upgrade to ChatGPT Plus only this morning. And I was immediately given the option of using GPT-4. And the first question, my very first interaction with the famed large language model was explain the stream of consciousness technique in The Garden Party by Catherine Mansfield. And I posted the response of ChatGPT Plus, or rather GPT-4, on my Twitter account, and it was very impressive. So the time has come for us to really consider the foundations of intelligence and understanding and consciousness and much more, and the future of technology, given the fact that we have this system. It's not fake, it's real. It's a puzzle, really. We understand how GPT is constructed. It's a wonderful technology, but where in that technology does the secret for intelligence lie? The fact that it has access to the large chunk of data on the internet on a scale much more than a single human can handle, probably would have something to do with its ability to exhibit intelligence. But even so, it is quite astonishing what large language models are capable of nowadays. And it really raises a question of the relationship of natural language to our intelligence. Of course, as humans, we communicate with other people through natural language, and we regard sophisticated manipulations of natural language systems as hallmark of intelligence. That was the whole premise of Alan Turing's paper on the so-called Turing test. And so from the output that we get from GPT Plus or GPT-4, they appear to be intelligent. Artificial intelligence systems seems to be capable of highly intelligent behavior, like IQ value of 120, some people would have said, which is astonishing. And it's quite an enigma how they can do that. They are human beings with much less capability for natural language processing among us, and artificial intelligence systems are performing better than that. So how is it possible? I'll continue my program after a break. So why large language models seemingly very efficient? One of the crucial insights I think would be there's an incredibly freedom in the word order in a sentence. So once you set an agenda, and as long as the context is all right, and you have a common understanding, well, so this is a really argumentative point, isn't it? I mean, do artificial intelligence systems really have common sense? But maybe when you break down common sense, it all comes back to word orders and what the next word is like to be. So, a very great opportunity for large language models to demonstrate their abilities, because that's precisely what they're designed to do. So as long as you keep to your context, it doesn't really matter what specific word orders would come out of the system. As I speak, while I'm walking in the streets of Tokyo, like this, the exact word would coming from my mouth. Is quite unpredictable. I mean, I can't predict what would come out of my mouth, except for statistical reasonings. And I do have some vague idea of what I'm going to say, but I am an observer as well as an action performer when it comes to word generation. I listen to my words coming out of my mouth, or rather out of my brain, and I'm sometimes astonished that certain words have come out of it. That's the whole point of actually recording these episodes of Street Brain Radio. It's put on my YouTube channel, and not many people listen to it, but it is an enjoyable experiment for me because I do not know what I'm going to say until I open my mouth and start talking about large language modules. I have a really vague idea of what I'm going to do and say in this episode, and that's probably one of the most interesting aspects of human brain, to be successfully emulated and probably overcome by artificial intelligence systems in the future. I have the fact that I have chosen large language models, the efficiency of large language models for the topic of this episode of Street Brain Radio is what you call intuition, and that cannot be described in terms of sentences. It's something more fundamental to my consciousness, to my cognition, but I have the gist of it, and I have made the decision to go ahead with the recording of Street Brain Radio on the theme of the superficial efficiency of large language models. Now, the word adjective superficial somehow surprised me because I didn't mean to say that in any derogatory manner. I just happen to be of the opinion that large language models are not capable of true intelligence as such, but they are very good at simulating the outputs of a truly intelligent, genuinely intelligent human being. Now that word, choice, truly, and then I corrected it to genuinely, because I thought genuinely was more appropriate in this context. That is exactly the thing that we do with word generation. We have a series of words more likely to be generated after a certain set of words. That is the context, and there is only this probabilistic process, and you are not aware of what words are coming out of your mouth. Anyway, I have to stop now again and resume this episode later. So I think large language models occupy a very interesting space. When it comes to mathematics and logical operations, everything needs to be precise. So you need to put a rigorous word, otherwise things will be very different. For example, if you are dealing with the non-commutative algebra in quantum mechanics, of course, if you change the orders, then the result will be quite different. Also, in natural language, we have the grammar. The grammar is very flexible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to express many things with your natural language. So the fact that large language models are able to come up with convincing outputs of natural language means that it's actually very flexible. The evaluation function is very wobbly. And in that wobbly space, the natural language processing artificial intelligence systems flourish. Because it's so precise. And so these outputs from LLMs make sense, and in a big way. I mean, they are quite impressive. But, having said that, when you really come to think about it, it's debatable whether the output of appropriate natural language sentences would be and could be considered the manifestations of true intelligence. Now, you might cite the famous AI effect, and you might accuse me of moving the bars again. I might be doing that, but In a way, the development of artificial intelligence systems are great in that they make us think more precisely, whereas earlier we used to think traditionally and characteristically wobbly ways. We now, faced with marvelous outputs of artificial intelligence systems, are forced to think more coherently. And by doing that, we would be pinpointing what is actually meant by intelligence in a precise manner. And possibly, the output of appropriate natural language sentences might not be neither necessary or sufficient in order to vouch a safe intelligence. Come back to you later. I have to stop again to do something about the Shinkansen train tickets. So I'm now on the platform for Shinkansen train, bound for Western Japan, and so I would say, the incredibly flexibility of word orders in natural language, provided that it follows grammar and also the context, I think is the foundation for the success of large language models. And arguably, it's probably much more robust than music. In music, you have the ordering of musical notes in order to make a great melody that should follow a certain pattern. But nowadays, in contemporary music, especially, people play with atonal note series. So anything is okay, really, as long as it makes sense in some sense, or even if it doesn't make any sense, well, it's going to be okay. But in the case of natural language, I think, we do not involve aesthetics so much. As long as the word orders are something that is reasonable, we accept them, even if they are not so great. The threshold for making a sentence sensible, I think, is probably lower than for music. We cannot really judge the greatness of a sentence. Even if a sentence sounds bland, we are seeing bland text every day. I mean, in most of the newspaper, magazine manuscripts are, bland, for the lack of better words. So we actually don't put such a strenuous demand on the quality of the natural language sentences that we encounter in our lives. So it's no wonder that when large language models come up with these sentences, we are more or less impressed. But however, the novelty value of these natural language processing artificial intelligence systems would naturally diminish over the years, or even weeks. So we will be more, not hostile, but more, strict when judging the quality of these sentences. When you think about it, natural languages are really a strange thing. When you are a native speaker, no matter how uniquely talented you are, or no matter how uniquely untalented you are, if you are mundane, you actually can emit words that would make sense to a majority of your fellow citizens. And that is precisely the nature of natural language. So, again, I need to refer back to Ludwig Wittgenstein's wonderful insight about private language. Ludwig Wittgenstein famously said that there is no private language. So natural language, belongs to that public sphere, and that means that everything is common, or commonplace. So if I ask somebody something about the United Nations, for example, or global warming, as far as that individual is equipped with sufficiently robust knowledge and has a command of sufficiently appropriate grammar, he or she would come up with a fairly narrow bandwidth of sentences. And so that's how we make sense of each other. So, when you think about it, although it is not really fair to say after the event, but when you think about it, the very nature of natural language is such that, any sufficiently configured system would come up with an output that makes sense in any way, in some way or another. Anyway, I'm getting back on the Shinkansen train now, so catch up with you later. So I have come to Kobe, and I'm going to give a public lecture later in this town. It was raining slightly in Tokyo, and in Kobe we have rainy weather too. But the rain has stopped for the moment, and so I can walk without an umbrella, which would be great. Walking with an umbrella is kind of cumbersome, although I do enjoy rain as a matter of principle. But however, I think I have a slight cold because of the rain that we had back in Tokyo. So, it's not really a great idea to have rain again in Kobe. Anyway, so I am continuing my discussion on large language models, and I think language is something really unique in that, given some constraint, as long as you follow these conditions, then anything goes. I mean, take novels, for example. The sheer foundation for novel writing is that you can write anything as long as it makes sense. The storyline would be meaningful. So there's this incredible amount of freedom in natural language. It's not that once you are given a certain series of words, you would be forced to put some particular words after that. It's not like that. There's an incredibly freedom in language, and even if a word disrupts context, we can adapt that too. So for example, if you have been writing about a particular thing for some time, and then you start to write about something quite another, it makes sense in a way, in a really postmodern way. So actually, prose writing is an art of breaking one's expectations, because by writing things that are not expected in a particular sequence of text, you can make the reader surprised and get pleasure from the surprise, and that is actually how many great works work. If the next sentence becomes too predictable, it would mean that the reader would be bored, and there's not much originality in the text. So, it's an incredibly flexible medium, the natural language sentences. So, I think that's the foundations for the perceivedly excellent performances of large language models. As long as it follows a certain context, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever the system outputs, within a range of possibilities, our brain would adapt to interpret its meanings, and even when there are possibly huge jumps in the logic, that might be taken as creativity too. So I think looking at the way GPT-4 is behaving for the moment, I think the problem is rather the lack of jumps rather than prevalence of it. Once you set a question and you set a context, the GPT-4 and other large language models do a really great job of staying within that context, and they are probably overdoing it in that when we are engaged in small talks, for example, I'm walking in Kobe and there's a car approaching, so I am attending to the car. It's a black car. I'm not very good at telling what type of car this is, but it's a Subaru. It doesn't mean a Subaru. So my context has been disrupted. But it's okay, isn't it? The fact that I am talking to my iPhone while I'm walking in Kobe means that there could be things that are not directly connected to the agenda of this episode, namely large language models. So I might be talking about this small car park. It's called One Park car park, and it's full. I also might be talking about the drink vending machine, which is ubiquitous in Japan. And I might actually be talking about two ladies walking on one side of the street, and another lady with a stroller, presumably with a baby on it. Well, maybe you don't know. I mean, nowadays, because many people carry their dogs around, not cats. So, all these random associations that can come in one's conversation is allowed and encouraged, actually, when you are conversing. So, natural language systems is a highly adaptive system, and in that, probably there's this really interesting possibility that it's akin to artificial life. Because, when you think about the life history of people, there's actually a field in science where people study the life history strategies of living organisms, and they discuss about the mating behavior, at what age they would produce offsprings, and how many offsprings, and eating strategies, and all these things is about life history strategies. And for humans, for example, the fact that we would sometimes go to college and graduate schools, and so that we would not be starting work for a living until we are 30. And so when I was a graduate student, my Canadian mom, Vanna, she was a kind host of my stay in Canada, British Columbia, Vancouver, when I was 15, when I was at the tender age of 15, and Vanna was my Canadian mother, and she used to tease me that I would be a perpetual student because, I graduated from the physics department, and then I went to study law, and then I went back to the graduate school of physics, and so I didn't start to work until I was very quite mature. So, Vanna was always teasing me about that. Now I'm deviating again, but so somebody might be actually a student until the age of 30. That's quite possible. So it's quite a, strategy, isn't it? And so there's such a variability of one strategy when it comes to life histories. And so life is about the diversity of strategies. And an analogy can be made between the outputs of large language models and life history strategies. the way large language models come up with output might be different from time to time. I noticed that with GPT-4 output, there was another output or whatever button, so that once I have a response to my query, they would be able to make another output, and that could be different. So there could be different outputs to one prompt, and that's because these systems are based on the assumption that the system predicts what would come after a particular sequence of words. And in that sense, they are, excuse my coffee. This is from the cold air that I was exposed to while I was at the whale park doing hanami. So the output for a large language system could be as valuable as the differences in life strategy in our lives. So it's quite valuable. So if you think about that, then it would appear that the way we make sense of large language model outputs is similar to the way we make sense of life history outputs. And I think that's something that's quite interesting and a potential research theme for large language models to compare the outputs of large language models with the specific trajectories of an artificial life system. And there could be some statistical analogy, and we could compare the constraint structure, how we can constrain and put context, and so that to constrain a particular output. We are living, and when we speak, this is like life history. Trajectory. Of course, body movements wise, I am just taking a walk in Kobe. So there's no jumping, there's no running, there's no flying, there's no squatting. But in terms of the language output, we are, in a sense, quite versatile in output. We are able to choose whatever strategy or trajectory we might like while conversing, and that is the wonderful thing about natural language systems. The great diversity of trajectories available. So in life, it makes sense to be versatile as possible with decisions and choices and life histories. And that's because if you become too predictable, then there's a danger that you will be taken advantage of. You would be very easy to predict, and you might actually, from game theoretic point of view, if your behaviors are completely predictable, then for your opponent, it's quite easy to make the most of your trajectory. So if your opponent knows what you're gonna say, then you would be probably bad at securing profit, because you actually cannot make the advantageous move of surprising the opponent, and that could be a problem for you. So from the very nature of conversation and its significance in our life history, it makes sense to be unpredictable, to be versatile in one's output. And that's probably why, we are incredibly adaptive to surprisingly different outputs of language systems. And that's how we are dealing with large language models too. So, for the moment, we are treating them as kind of pupils. We are behaving like teachers, and we are expecting the large language models to be model pupils to come up with the expected answers, and that's why we make often comparisons between large language models and college students. We often discuss how well their outputs are aligned with the queries, prompts, and we kind of score them according to their performance and give them a grade. And that is exactly what we're doing in conventional schools. But in real life, when we are conversing with somebody, we are not actually giving them scores. We are not actually evaluating them on the predictability of their responses, because when you are getting responses that are aligned with your queries, then the outputs are actually very predictable. They are, great in terms of students answering professors' questions, but they are not great in terms of, surprising in terms of providing unpredictable responses, so that you would enjoy the communication, so that things can be negotiated, so that the artificial intelligence would be in a better position in putting things forward. That's not going to happen. So when you see the outputs of large language models like that, then it could be argued that we could be pursuing a totally different trajectory from what is prevalent now. We could ask the large language models to be, for example, as entertaining as possible, or as tough negotiator as possible, or to be really stimulating discussant as possible. So when you successfully fine-tune the large language models along these lines, I think that would be a totally wider arena for alignments, human artificial intelligence alignments. And that, I think, is going to be much more interesting than the present day tendency. I think it's going to be short-lived, although, of treating the large language models as if they were students trying to answer the professor's question, that is you, correctly. So when I'm right now, I'm in the middle of bar restaurant district in Motomachi, I think, in Kobe. The rain has kind of intensified, so I'd better do something about it. But actually, I'm approaching my destination, so probably I will keep moving without an umbrella. When I was in the UK, I noticed that people don't use umbrellas so much. Here in Japan, people usually make a fuss about the rain, and they tend to use umbrellas even for a very slight rain. And there might be actually statistical correlation between the tendency of people to use umbrellas and the tendency of people to use masks. We wear face masks, but that statistics, statistical correlation would be rather trivial. It's something obvious, isn't it? So now I'm coming to an area where it's called Higashimon Street. If you're familiar with Kobe, maybe you know where I am now. I'm passing in front of a restaurant called Satuya and Ikuta Jinja. It's a shrine, quite a big one. I remember when there was this great Kobe earthquake, the main buildings of this shrine were destroyed. The Kobe earthquake happened in 1995, 28 years ago, and I remember it well as how it was when I came to this area of Kobe. Anyway, so I think I'm actually approaching my destination today. So I think I'll probably stop and sum up. So the reason why large language models perform well is probably because there's such a really incredibly large space for flexible dynamics in language to begin with. Because when we speak, we are living, and the diversity of language is the diversity of life's trajectories. So in that game of life, it makes sense not to be so predictable, not to answer your questions directly, but to sometimes bypass a question or start quite different topic. So by that kind of interaction, you can make life's conversations robust and interesting. So that's probably why a large potential of artificial intelligence systems is still untapped, because people are too eager to make the large language models behave as if they are obedient pupils, whereas they should be treated as an opponent in the game of life or a partner in the great tango of life. So with that, I close this episode of Kenmoku's Story to Brain Radio, and I think I'm in front of a Don Quixote store outlet. Don Quixote is a famous 100 yen. It's a dollar shop basically, and I think I'm quite close to where I'm going. So thank you for listening.